Welcome to the Toolbox with a very handy tool for students and young professionals and how to move forward more smoothly. And this tool is actually a principle called the Pareto principle, also called the 80-20 principle. And what's it about? Because it's a principle that comes back in many, many data sets. And some years ago, Wilfredo Pareto discovered that, he looked at data sets and he realized that 80% of the wealth in Italy belonged to about 20% of the population. He saw this as an unequal distribution, so-called the Pareto distribution. And he realized that this principle is noticeable in many, many data sets. And therefore, the insights that's being applied now in time management, project management, quality, sales, you name it, it's a principle that you find back in many, many concepts and domains. And a very handy thing to understand, whatever you do, else work-wise, is 20% of efforts gives 80% of results. There's also a bit of a risk attached to that, because sometimes you do know which efforts are needed to get this 80%. So for certain things, it can be very clear, like projects, when you have clear data set. But when you're studying, for example, this is not always clear. So therefore, the 80-20 principle is not always handy in certain cases, but it's really helpful for you to understand, hey, by the way, this is gives me 80% of results. But you have to understand which one is the 20% of efforts that needed. So be aware of that. But it's a very, very handy tool to understand. If you graph it, it is also called long tail. So here in green, you see the efforts, for example, you do. In green, it gives you 8% of results of income or whatever it is. But it's also the long tail. And the long tail here is shown in yellow. Do not underestimate it, because it's also very, very important in business as well. So you cannot always remove the long tail just because of the fun of it, because it looks like you don't need it. Actually, the long tail makes that the green zone is possible. So be aware of that. So just an example, practical example. If you look at the clothes you're wearing, from all your clothes, probably there is 20% of your clothes that you will be wearing 80% of the time, roughly. Sometimes it's 10-90, sometimes it's 30-70. But this is something you find back. In movies, you have some clear data. You can find back, hey, which movies are bringing the most revenue. And I'll show that in a minute. Out of curiosity, let's just look at a data set from the box office for movies worldwide, taken today. And if you can see Barbie and Super Mario Bros. Movies and Oppenheimer, they score pretty high. Like say Oppenheimer scores 926 million. But if you go down the list, for example, at position number 10, you see Ant-Man, 476 million. Position 20, 188 million. And if you go down the list, you will end up with much smaller numbers, like in this case, position 200, 3.8 million. So actually, the Pareto principle you can apply to data set, like for example here applied on the box office, 223. But let's take another year, because this year is still ongoing. Let's say 2007. And in 2007, we had Pirates of the Caribbean, 960 million, Harry Potter 941 million, Spider-Man 894 million. Okay, fine, big numbers. But on position 10, it already drops to 456 million. Position 20, 258 million. And again, if you go down the list, you see the numbers declining. This is so-called the long tail. Here to number 218 million. So no matter which year you take, you will find back the Pareto principle. And just to illustrate you, hey, it's a concept you need to know to understand that this Pareto principle you can find back in many, many data sets. So if you do any project, any research, even in biology, for example, economics, you name it, you will find back this Pareto principle. That's a very important principle to understand, as you can check yourself here on this data set from the International Movie Database online. Netflix, for example, when they started with the DVD business. And what they actually applied was the green zone, the 2080 principle, so the welcome zone, or the zone with most revenue, so to speak, was for them important. But the yellow tail was also available. So they were offering a large range of movies such that they had this really broad offering. And that made Netflix stood out. A lot of companies would select only on the green part, like I just showed in the graph, where, yes, it brings a lot of revenue, it's important. But for Netflix, they realized even this yellow tail made that it attract them a large amount of customers who are really interested in this broad offering. So the yellow tail is an example where the yellow tail can be very, very relevant and very important. For Netflix, it was their business model, actually. And so keep in mind that the yellow tail is very, very relevant. Now, this is extremely, extremely useful when you have to do any type of analysis, whether it's economics, physics, biology. You will find somewhere a Pareto distribution. So, and that's very handy for you to know. Be aware of it when you're studying. It's a bit more tricky because you only know which parts are important after you studied it. So in the examples I gave before, let's say on the box office for movies, yes, the data set is available after the movie came out, after the movie was made, and where the movie is brought in circulation. And that gives you a data set. And then you can know, hey, 2080 principle, you can apply it straight away. But when you study something, you don't know exactly which parts are important or not important. That said, some courses are really well designed, such that you help you to understand, hey, these are the 20 most important elements or topics in a course, and therefore you should focus on it. It doesn't mean that your professor will follow the same logic in asking you the question about it, because he might be interested in the details behind it, the reasoning, how you get to that. But be aware of it, that even when you study and the methods you apply, certain methods will give you more results and more output. So keep that in mind. So this is a quick introduction to the Pareto principle. Keep it in mind. I would keep it always in mind when you see data sets, and you will be amazed how much you find back this Pareto principle in almost all data sets you come across. So have a look at it. Be surprised about this phenomena. It's a fantastic insight you will have during the next years and the next months. Try it out.